So thank you all for being here, and I want to take a moment to thank all the people that are standing behind me that are in support of this very, very important bill. Let me just briefly summarize the intent of Senate Bill 1108. The idea was to create a safer school environment with the auspice and the increase of school threats and the trauma that it causes not only to the administration and the function in school. More importantly, it has dramatically impacted the mental health of our students. We've gotten tremendous input from parents, from educators, and from law enforcement who have really raised this issue as an important factor. And allow me to go right to the point to acknowledge that we have Maureen and Bernie Reedy, who are parents who initiated this bill. And I would like for them to come up and share with you their experiences and really why this bill is so important. Bernie and Maureen, please come on up.
Hello, my name is Maureen Reedy. I am a mother of 2 children that attend St. Rose School in Newtown. Since the tragedy in Sandy Hook, there have been many threats that have been phoned in to our school and to the church and the surrounding schools, not only just in Newtown, but in several towns in the surrounding area. Because we live in Newtown and we go to St. Rose, it is very specific to my family's experience. There has been several times where the children were getting released from school when the threats had taken place, and there were police officers and SWAT teams with their weapons drawn. When the children were coming out of school, the children would have to be escorted to their cars by police officers and priests. There were SWAT teams and police that had to storm the building, yell to the children and the staff members to get down. Children were shoved into closets where they store chairs. There were 2, actually on November 14th, this last lockdown that we had, it was a very serious threat that had been called into St. Rose School. The children knew that this was not a drill. The teachers rushed them into the gym equipment closets, the chair closets, and the kitchen, and tried to hide them from the windows. The children thought that 1214 was happening all over again. There were kids that were crying, that were wetting their pants, and it was a very difficult day for them. Getting the call or the text that your children's school is in lockdown after what happened at Sandy Hook School is very anxiety-ridden. You feel helpless. You just want to go get your children and take them home. It is very important that we have stricter penalties for those who commit these crimes against these schools. We need to do the best that we can do to protect our children. We can't undermine our child's sense of security anymore. The psychological effects can be seen for weeks and even months after these lockdowns occur. In our own home, our children experience nightmares, bedwetting. They're afraid to be alone or go to bed at night. They're very afraid to go to school after these happen. These emotional reactions are triggered by the flashbacks of that horrific day. I also have sisters that are teachers in other towns and other states. They also experience times where they just practice lockdowns, and their children experience so much anxiety just from the practice, knowing what happened in Sandy Hook. This is very real, and I'm asking that you please pass this bill. Thank you.
I would just like to add to Maureen's comments. Before I do, I wanted to thank Tony Hwang for his leadership with this bill, and Senator Tony Boucher for support as well. This is a very important issue. And I think the first thing I'd like to just stress is this is not a Newtown issue. I think it impacts us greatly having to relive these severe threats of violence that get brought against our community and our schools and our children. In this day and age, unfortunately, it becomes common practice. I mean, lockdowns become as common as fire drills. Since the Sandy Hook tragedy, there's been over 100 school shootings across the country and tens of thousands of phoned-in threats, acts of violence, just violence in general being brought against schools, teachers, administrators. It's become an epidemic, and I think we all have a responsibility to ensure we're doing everything we can to create a safe, nurturing environment for our kids to learn. I think there's two places in the world that we would expect our children to be the most safe: our homes and our schools. And it's not happening at schools. I mean, I think when you look back, no one wants or expects to have a tragedy occur like we've witnessed and seen in Sandy Hook and the state of Connecticut. And with that comes great responsibility to ensure that what we do in the aftermath of that is everything we possibly can do to ensure that the laws that are in place are protecting our children as best we can. I'd say that our schools have responded in the ways where it should. We've seen increased security measures being brought into school. The physical plant and equipment have been fortified. We've seen best practices brought to procedures and policies. But the one area that we haven't seen action on has been the state law. There is no existing law on the books that explicitly will target schools as a threat against schools as a specific crime, and that has to change. I mean, at what point do we say enough is enough? We owe it to ourselves to act now, to show the world, to show our nation, to show our community that we will take a zero tolerance to violence against our schools, our administrators, the teachers, and our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I do also want to acknowledge the really hard work of the Newtown delegation. We have Representative J.P. Straczynski, Mr. Representative Mitch Belinsky, and we also want to acknowledge Krista McCarthy-Vahey, who attended and supported this as well. When we talk about schools, when we talk about the developmental aspect of education and safety in schools, I'm excited to have Dr. Joseph Arati, the superintendent of the Newtown schools, be able to offer his perspective on this issue. Dr. Arati.
Thank you, Senator. And let me start by thanking the Reedies and the entire Newtown delegation as I stand with absolute endorsement of Bill number 1108. I've been a school superintendent for a very long time. I'm now the superintendent in Newtown. I don't want anyone to believe that this is a Newtown event. It's not. I would have the same passion with this event if I was still in Southington, where I was a superintendent there for a number of years. What alarms me is the uptick of frequency, the amount of calls that come through all of our local schools. And what further alarms me is the response that takes place after that call has been made. I feel very strongly that every local police department needs to have a highly sophisticated technology crime division to appropriately do the investigation, and when the perpetrator is apprehended, a penalty of great significance. Thus, my support for this bill. I've seen schools, Newtown schools, Southington schools, become paralyzed with fear from these types of calls. To give you a sense what I do and what we need to do because of social media, when we have disruption at this level, and it's extraordinary disruption in a school day, what I typically will have is a school community forum that evening to explain why we did what we did and just to check in. How are the students, and how are the parents, and how are the staff? And the overarching common conversation is the child goes home riddled with anxiety, with trepidation, with fear, the concern to come back the next day. In October and in November of this school year in our Newtown schools, we were victimized by threatening calls. I need not say more of the magnitude of that type of call to Newtown Public Schools. However, I am certain that whether the call came to Newtown or any other district in the state of Connecticut, the act is a heinous act, and there must be vigilance leading to arrest and appropriate consequences. I'll end where I started. I'm thankful that the Reedies brought this forward to our delegation, and I'm fortunate to stand here in full support of this bill.
Thank you, Dr. Roddy, and thank you for your great work in the community. And I want to take a moment to thank the Judiciary Committee and its leadership and its members for raising this bill and drafting the language on this. Because one of the important parts of this, I think the idea is critical and important and needed, but there are considerations that we have to give in regards to the judicial and legal aspects of this. And for that, I want to be able to bring in our Chief of Police in Newtown, Chief Keogh, to be able to offer some perspective of how this has impacted their ability to conduct the business of public safety, but also truly the municipal cost and impact on its staff and its morale. Thank you, Mr.
Today, when a threat is transmitted to a community or a school, we know the impact it can have not only on the community of the school and the environment and the atmosphere of that school, but we also know the impact it can have on law enforcement and the resources that are necessary to actually investigate and deal with the immediate response. It's usually massive. It's usually well orchestrated, but it takes a lot of time and also personnel to do that. And then, of course, what we have afterwards is a tremendous investigation that will occur because we do not want these things to occur again. Unfortunately, they do occur again. And because of the attention and the uptick in school violence that we have seen in America, the attention to these kind of matters are also increasing the threats that we see to our schools and our communities. So the mere mention of violence being perpetrated in a school is highly disruptive, as we can imagine, and emotionally damaging. Therefore, the legislation is important and to the educational learning environment and atmosphere. And I want to bring up one particular threat that I was very, very close to. And it actually happened 4 days after the San Diego event. I have been a part of all the threats that occurred in our town, but I think we may have forgotten the threat that came into another elementary school just 4 days after Sandy Hook. So the date was December 18th, 2012, where after much consideration from our school officials, our elected officials, to when do we resume school, and they decided that would occur on December 18th. Within 20 minutes of high school becoming fully functioning, we had a threat go to another elementary school in Newtown, and certainly, fortunately for all of us, we had enough law enforcement in the region, in our area, to handle that response. But as you can imagine, the response on that kind of day was massive. We had ESU people from the state police already on site, dealing with a lot of other things. So I think back to that day. I think back to that moment when I walked into the school and had to address the staff. Fortunately, the students were not there yet. They were still probably waiting to get on school buses. And wisely, the school day for that particular school was canceled. But the teachers were there. They were there for a lot of different reasons. Early was certainly to strategize about how they were going to handle and talk to the students. But you can imagine they were pretty emotionally damaged from that call. We had to lock them in for almost an hour while we swept the entire school, every car. We couldn't allow their loved ones to come and visit with them because we had several perimeters set up. Well, you can imagine that response on that day and other days when these kinds of events occur. So it's important that we pass legislation to prevent these events from occurring. I think that's what I would say today. And I know our Connecticut Chiefs of Police Association is in favor of this. So law enforcement is in favor of increasing it. And I wish that the legislature would certainly act on it in that manner. So I thank you for the opportunity this morning.
Thank you, Chief. And one of the questions I have, and maybe one of you could possibly answer it. There's that real concern with juvenile offenders and the consideration that should they not be thinking properly and with the escalation of this penalty, that in some cases 14-year-olds could be charged as adults as a Class D felony. I'd like to get Dr. Arati and the Chief's perspective in regards to the developmental aspects of it, and also the Chief in regards to the real complexities, the real concerns that we want to be able to address in this legislation as we move forward. We want to be sure that we are doing the right things and we set an agenda forward. But perhaps Dr. Arati and Chief Keogh can offer some perspective.
The end result, the bottom line, is that whoever is making this call, if it is a juvenile, behaviors need to change, and that's the piece that's most important. The behavior needs to change, and the consequence that is in place with this bill. The reason why I support the bill is because it has set the bar high, and I think that's an important piece to this. And then let the judicial system sort out where that should go from there. But this raises the bar of understanding, and in many cases, that person making the call has a really fine understanding of what the consequence could be. This may be a deterrent to the call, and if it's not a deterrent and the call goes through and the apprehension and the arrest takes place, I am pleased that the bar will start where this bill starts the bar, and then let things happen. Basic bottom line is changing behaviors, and this bill, I believe, is an opportunity for those behaviors to change.
It's my hope that, if we do arrest juveniles, and let's face it, not only juveniles are making these or transmitting these threats. Many adults are doing that too. But if juveniles should do that, I think there's enough diversionary programs in place, enough prosecutorial discretion to say, listen, let's move in a different direction with this young person. And I think that's important. But I also want to send that very strong message, as Dr. Arati said, that we want the behaviors to stop. This is not correct. It's damaging to so many environments and so many people. So I think that as long as we have flexibility in the law and in various laws to do that, I think this particular law will work.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your thoughts on that, and I'm appreciative of your continual commitment in working through this process. But I think as the Reedies bring back, and as we kind of wrap this around, I think as we have, as legislative body, focused so much on a safe school environment, this component is important because it addresses the mental health aspect of teachers, administrators, staff, and most importantly, the children that are going through the educational process. So I'd like to be able to ask the Reedies to come back up and offer their perspective firsthand, personal, and how much they have engaged and have endured and experienced that aspect, not only in the love that they have for their children and the children that they see at the schools, but also as a parent and what you go through and potentially the devastating impact that this has on the mental health well-being of our students and people in school.
Sure. I think from our earlier portion of the testimony, listening to my wife Maureen, and you can tell the emotion that it brings to us. And I think we don't do enough justice to what the kids go through. I mean, these are true fears, legitimate fears that get caused. And we spend countless hours, reassuring the kids that they'll be safe. And deep down in the back of your mind, you always have the doubt yourself, or knowing that there is still some vulnerability. And that's a real challenge. I mean, we live in a different world. We certainly do. And I've witnessed firsthand my kids, just from a development standpoint, have had some regression through their studies and their education. Missing days of school, being so upset. My daughter specifically with stomach problems and not being able to eat. My son just with self-confidence issues and just being confident that he can go to school and not have to worry about anything and just learn. And I think that's the true upsetting aspects to all of this. And I would also say, too, from witnessing our friends and family, I mean, we're just giving a testament to what we've experienced. And, there's other families in town that have lost children through the tragedy, and I can only imagine, what they go through on a daily basis when they have to endure, a senseless, violent threat that comes to a school and their children are evacuated. and that did happen with Chalk Hill School at the beginning of the year, where there was a bomb threat apparently called in, and the entire school had to be evacuated. But the parents and the kids in town, I've seen similar experiences with other families that we've testified to, but also we've lost teachers out of our schools that just can't endure it anymore, and that happened right after the events and the tragedies in town, and then the ensuing threats that occurred in the following days. And we lost friends of ours who decided to leave the state and move because they couldn't continue with that constant threat that was being phoned in. And again, I would say this isn't a Newtown issue. I got friends and family that are in the state of Connecticut and other towns and cities, and they have similar experiences.
I would just like to add that there are days when these threats are called in, and picking up your child after school and being so happy that they are safely home with you, the conversations are such that, Mommy, do you think that they would tape up the windows so that if the shooter comes, the bullets can't penetrate? And it's my job to make sure that I pull down the shades and the portables. And, Mommy, we hid behind the desk today. And thank God Mrs. Diamond knew what to do, because she's very smart, and she went out, actually, and she was very brave to make sure that there was no bad people outside the school. So it's these kinds of things that I don't think any parent should go through, or teacher. And like Bernie had said earlier, there was a teacher that actually left November 15th, which was the day after the last lockdown, and she couldn't handle it anymore. And I just believe that if this bill gets passed, and that being a former educator of children, especially who have emotional issues and disturbance, I know that there are people in the world that have mental health issues that will continue to call in these threats. And if we give them a stiff enough consequence, I truly believe that some of this will stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. And I know it's very difficult, and I appreciate your tremendous efforts in sharing with us. I'd like to ask JP Straczynski to maybe offer a few words. JP represents a little bit of Sandy Hook, but also represents Monroe, which is currently housing the Sandy Hook Elementary School. But a few quick words, please.
Thank you, Senator Hwang. Thank you for your leadership on this issue, as well as Representative Belinsky, the Newtown delegation, and I want to thank the Reedies for being here. It takes a lot of courage to come to the Capitol and voice your concerns, to put a plan in action, to put a face with the law. A lot of people complain about law, they complain about what we do up here. Very few actually take the initiative to come up here. And to have the Reedies do that's a very powerful message. As Senator Hwang said, I represent all of Monroe and a portion of Newtown, so I have the unique experience of hosting the Sandy Hook Elementary School right now. We're a very proud community to do that, very happy to host and be a good neighbor. As I said when we began this journey, Newtown was always our neighbor to the north, but now they're our family, and we really believe that. However, that hasn't come without some security and action by the Monroe Police Department and Newtown Police Department in joint efforts to protect our children. And that's what it comes down to. That's our responsibility, is to protect our children. And as legislature, we need to protect our children the best way we can, and that's to enact strong laws. Senate Bill 1108 sends a strong, clear message that threats against schools are not jokes. They're not meant to get out of class. They're not meant to get out of tests. They're not a joke. They are serious, and they will not be tolerated by the state of Connecticut. We need to make sure we do that. We know that. Moving forward, I want to thank again Senator Hwang for his leadership on this issue. I want to thank the police chief from Newtown for being here, Dr. Arardi, and again the Reedies for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have Senator Boucher speak briefly before she heads into the Judiciary Committee, where she will help us tremendously on this bill. Followed by Representative Belinsky.
Yes, Representative Belinsky, who has represented Newtown so well. I just want to also add my appreciation and commend the individuals behind me, particularly my friend and colleague Bernie Reedy, who didn't just start advocating on behalf of these children today or in the last threat that was posed, but he's been really persistent and tenacious for the last 2 years in bringing this forward. And in the beginning, there were doubters, but as this issue continued to become such a difficult and creating such a climate of fear in the communities and in our schools that you have just heard make it very difficult for learning to occur. In fact, the repercussions of just a threat itself, in addition to an action, will affect the children and the staff and even our first responders for a long, long time. It's a long-lasting effect. And so anything we can do to at least help to reduce, as was mentioned, you can't eliminate, but to reduce these incidents from occurring is a very, very good thing. And I am very proud of Senator Hwang to taking this on and making sure it gets through our process and all of the leadership in the town, but particularly these parents who speak not just for their own children, but you can just imagine the other parents that find it so difficult now to speak up and need to heal and get this behind them, that it's needed to have a spokespeople that are so courageous, a mom and a dad that have to experience this with their own children. So I thank you all, and I look forward to hearing this again so that you can give the same testimony in front of the rest of the Judiciary Committee so we can be successful in getting it out this year. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see you in Judiciary Committee. And we have Representative Mitch Belinsky representing Newtown.
Thank you very much. I'm going to keep my comments very brief, which is not something that's characteristic of me. We're due in the Judiciary Committee right now to testify, and we're up early, so I'm going to encourage everybody to go in there and give it their all. I've already had meetings with the leadership of the Judiciary Committee. They're tuned in to our needs and the needs of the state of Connecticut. We're very, very grateful for this bill being raised and the hard work that Senator Hwang has done, and all the people standing behind me. They're our hometown heroes, and we're going to go out there. We're going to get this bill passed. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, and it is Senate Bill 1108, and I want to close by thanking all these fantastic people behind me. But I think a theme that needs to be reiterated again. This is a bill that not only impacts Newtown, but the entire state of Connecticut. For every child, every teacher, every administrator, to create a safe school environment. So I want to thank you, and my heart goes out to all of your efforts and my deepest appreciation. Thank you.